welcome to the Sunseeker podcast. Today we have our guest, KP, who is a specialist in Ayurvedic medicine and a whole host of things. So thanks so much, KP, for joining me. And I would just want to get, just a little bit into some of your accolades because I think that you have a lot of things that you've done through your, I believe, 50 years of holistic medicine experience.
Yeah, well, thanks, Christian, for having me. Looking forward to having our discussion. Yeah, 52 years in practice.
Wow, 52 years. That's incredible. So just wanted to go through just some of the accolades of, or just the things that you've done. The president of Emeritus American Herbalist Guide and Teacher. You're also a writer. You've presented at 200 national conferences. You've published over 3,000 health articles, and you are also someone who served as a senior research scientist and chief medical formulator for Yogi Tea, which is really cool for me because just growing up, I had that tea in my house since I was like a young child. So I think that it's kind of crazy. It's a little bit like full circle, but those are just a couple of things that you've done, and you're doing so much right now with a number of topics with your IIEI, the International Integrative Educational Institute. So the first question that I wanted to ask you about was that growing up in Oregon, you had a series of illnesses or disorders that you worked on healing yourself, and then you got into this work of basically healing the world. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it wasn't really so much a series of problems. It was one specific problem. I had a degenerative disease of the spine, and the diagnosis was a little vague. But in any case, I went to an army of orthopedic practitioners. Nobody could do anything about it. And they just said, don't get addicted to morphine too young because you're going to need a lot later. And at 10 years old, it's very hard to comprehend that. So I just continued with my regular life. But year by year, I had more and more pain in my spine. By the time I was in high school, I was in pain every waking moment. But I decided to just go ahead and continue to live my life. So I did all kinds of active things, a lot of outdoorsy kinds of things, camping, hiking, climbing, canoeing, all those kinds of things. And I just dealt with the pain. But as it was getting worse and worse, I began to experiment with some other kinds of things. This was during the hippie times, and these new ideas were becoming available to us, natural medicine kinds of ideas, Eastern thought, things like that. So the first thing that actually resolved my pain, even for a moment, was a yoga class. I was going to yoga class because I was interested in the consciousness aspect of yoga, but we did an exercise that left me free of pain for about 5 minutes, which is all I'd had for the past several years. I was just beginning college at that point, and so I thought, well, if there's one thing that can do that, there might be others, and began investigating these sorts of things. I really was not so focused on my own health because I'd been told by a cadre of doctors that there was nothing that could be done about it, and so I didn't expect anything to be done. But gradually, as I became more interested in these ideas, really more for the sake of just the ideas themselves and what might be accomplished with them, the better I began to feel. And then I realized that it did have application for my situation. So I think it's kind of the classic wounded healer story where I really initially wasn't focusing on benefiting myself, but underneath there was a subconscious motivation, I think. In any case, it took a matter of just a few years to get that under control. I haven't had pain in my spine for a long time now, close to that 50 years. And my spine, which looked like Swiss cheese on the x-rays when I was a kid, is all filled in, and you can't tell that I ever had that disorder, and I'm feeling great.
Wow, that's great. You're speaking about just the the ability to kind of heal yourself, or the desire to search out things, whether that's consciously or physically. And you're speaking about yoga. I personally, how I've basically got introduced into this space, and even the consciousness expansion space. Like that's the idea behind the whole podcast, is just a consciousness expansion podcast for young people. Is that I personally was struggling with recovery and addiction issues, and through that I was on a whole host of medications and things, and through recovery and then into recovery into onto the chef network, into a kundalini yoga class, I basically began this journey. And so I know that you were one of the really early practitioners of so like yoga and possibly kundalini yoga. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, that was during a very experimental time where there were many Asian spiritual teachers coming to America, and we had access to those people. And so I listened to what they had to say and read their books and incorporated those kinds of ideas. Decided to embrace the Sikh religion or philosophy. We don't actually call it a religion, we call it a dharma, which just means a lifestyle or a way of being, a philosophy, something like that. It was very well suited to what I felt was appropriate for me. So I converted to that particular lifestyle, which I've been doing again about that same length of time, about 52 years. So all these things were sort of brewing and coming together as an older teenager. And finally, it all got kind of solidified. And I got into the practice of natural medicine. What we could know at that time was very little about any of these kinds of things. You know, we had a vague idea that there was something called acupuncture, and we had some idea that maybe there were some herbs or diet, and we did really exotic things like eat tofu and rice, and we got connected with these kinds of ideas. And then over the years, as those energy connections built up, or communication channels from these other older cultures, we were able to learn the entire thing. So I use an amalgamation of all those kinds of ideas, the big three natural healing systems: Western, Ayurvedic, and Chinese, and I use them all freely in a mixed kind of way.
Can you explain, just for the audience who aren't really familiar with Ayurvedic medicines and herbs, if you could just kind of give a base or just a simple, I guess, explanation about what it is and kind of like the balance that is sought through that?
Ayurveda is often called the sister science of yoga, which even probably is separating them a little too much. They come from similar roots, and by about 500 years ago, they had merged into being one thing essentially. So, yoga is the mental and spiritual development side of South Asian healing traditions, and Ayurveda is the medical side. So, they are completely intertwined. Ayurvedic practitioners will practice and recommend yoga, and yoga teachers will practice and recommend Ayurveda. So they come from the same philosophies originally. They have the same underlying structure. So people who are practicing yoga are doing that based on ideas that Ayurveda shares with them. Ayurveda certainly includes all those ideas, but it's a completely formed healing system that was in its ascension already by 5,000 years ago. So we could probably push back some of the original documents that talked about these things to about 5,000 years ago. The major texts that describe traditional Ayurveda were written around 2,300 years ago. So it's been practiced for a very long time. Many people call it the mother of all healing because we think it's the historical root of both Chinese medicine and Western natural medicine. So when we got to that time, around 2,300 years ago, there was a pan-Eurasian system of medicine from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Everybody was practicing pretty much the same way with the same ideas, vocabulary, concepts. And each place that these things took root had a little bit different kind of perspective. So Ayurveda and Chinese medicine are 90% identical. Of course, they use different language, different vocabulary, and then the actual pharmacology, the medicines that we use, are about one third overlapping between Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, and then also about one third overlapping between Ayurveda and Western herbalism. So Ayurveda, being in the middle of the continent, was able to sort of be the place that everybody passed through all these ideas and teachers and books and plants. uh, Ayurveda got to assess and utilize. So it's a system that includes every aspect that you could imagine of how to become healthy or how to stay healthy. Ideally, we're supposed to be born healthy and we just maintain that. That doesn't happen anymore. Now we have to help people regain their health and then help them stay in balance. But the idea is that we want you to be in the what we call the zone of dynamic balance, the middle area between being too hot, too cold, your body being overactive or underactive, being too wet, too dry. So we sustain that balance using a lot of herbal medicine. That's a big factor in Ayurveda, but also diet, lifestyle practices, exercise, body work. The list goes on, but just about every other holistic practice that you've ever heard of is included in Ayurveda.
It's a great explanation and summary. And it's so interesting how it's just like you're saying, it's all basically connected. And I think that in my own journey right now, I was interested to speak with you because I work in the recovery industry with addicts and alcoholics, and even my own nutrition. At times working in that kind of capacity, I feel like has I don't know if it's taken a hit or whatever, but I'm trying to come back to a place in where I'm working on my own health, not just the meditation, not just the yoga, and just like the full picture of things. So the through a lot of your courses that you offer, you have a specific program that has to do with recovery and addiction, and I'd like you to speak to that because working in this industry, when you go to sober houses or whatever, the first thing that they have there, it's like a lot of, like bad food or whatever that immediately supplements from one addiction to another. And then there's, it just moves and moves in cycles. So, what are some of the key ways or things that someone who is dealing or struggling with addiction can utilize from your course that you offer?
Many years ago, I, for several years, was the manager of the nutritional therapy department of a holistic hospital. And mainly what we did was substance rehab. So we had people in there for extensive stays. Most people stayed about 6 weeks, covered by their insurance. And we used these ideas. It was Ayurvedically inspired, although not 100% Ayurvedic. And so these people would come there. Usually they shot dope around the corner before they walked in the door. So we were dealing with uh, their detox right there in our face, immediately within a few hours, and then their uh, gradual recovery. And so these people, after they sort of were able to function again a little bit a few days later, would start going to one activity after another all day long. So they had yoga class, various exercises, maybe they played tennis, things like that, body work, psychotherapy issues. And they were stuck there. They certainly could leave. They were there voluntarily, but if they were going to be there, they had to eat what we gave them to eat. So each person would have a special diet based on their own particular needs, and those things would include all kinds of various healing foods, and then we give them nutritional supplements, vitamins, herbal medicine, things like that. One of the things that happened there was, in order to be able to take insurance of most people, we had to have a 12-step program on site for these people. We were not a 12-step program, and we didn't necessarily align with 12-step programs, but we had to use one of our rooms for the gathering room for every type of anonymous you could imagine: Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Al Anon, and the list goes on. And so hour after hour, people were traipsing into this room doing what 12-step programs do. But the people that set up these programs always would bring uh, a sugary food, donuts, things like that, and coffee. And then people weren't allowed to smoke at the hospital, but somehow cigarettes managed to find their way into these meetings. And so here we were, this drugless hospital that allowed smoking and didn't have sugar in their diet and things like that. So our patients then would find themselves in these meetings where they could indulge all those other addictions, and it was challenging because they get all doped up on sugar, coffee, cigarettes, and then take another day or two to detox them from all that. And by that time, it was time for another 12-step meeting. But we eventually received an award for being the most successful rehab facility in the country, our rate of return to addiction was the lowest of any facility anywhere. So we had extensive outpatient support programs so that people could go back to their city where they lived and then connect with people of right mind and continue with support for their diet and health practices, things like that. So very, very successful based on a very holistic approach. We just did everything physically, mentally, spiritually. So many things that can be done, especially in the herbal world. Very often, it's just a matter of getting back to eating good diet, having good sleep, having good energy during the day, and just reestablishing a healthy life rhythm, which most people who are dealing with substances don't have. They're up all hours of the day or night, and they eat whatever is available. And people who are using opiates are always constipated, and typically they don't have great appetite, and so that's always an issue. They can't detox naturally from their own body because they have a bowel movement once a week. So getting all those things up and running again really is kind of the core of helping people be healthy. And if they can just stay away from their substances of choice for a while, things start to heal, and then we nudge it with things like proper diet and herbal medicine.
Well, thank you for doing all of that. I personally, I mean, I'm coming up on 3 years in recovery soon, and I'm really, interested on that aspect of the diet. I think that also a lot of people that I know in recovery and who have been recovering for some years are looking to, gain a healthy balance and a healthy life and not be kind of slavishly devoted to cravings, whether that's food or caffeine. Um, I also, you were mentioning sleep and just the significance and the importance of sleep. I think that now, most recently, in the past like decade or so, maybe, yeah, probably the most past decade, where I remember when I was younger reading people who seemed to be successful, like, oh, only sleep 4 hours and work all the other hours. And now it's the emphasis on that sleep is important and that you need more sleep. And so, I guess based on your courses and your finding having to do with CBD, sleep apnea, yoga sleep, what have the findings been, and I guess what do you all suggest for sleep for the clients that are taking your courses?
Yeah, sleep is critical for good health. In fact, Ayurveda uh, defines the three pillars of health as diet, sex, and sleep. So if those aspects of your life are going well, then it's likely that your overall health is good. And likewise, if your overall health is good, it's likely that those other things are going well. So we want people to sleep enough so that they have good energy during the day and they have a comfortable experience at night. I would say that if a person is able to go to bed, fall asleep more or less immediately, 10, 15 minutes, and then sleep all the way through the night, it's fine to get up to urinate, but be able to go right back to sleep, awaken in the morning, feeling alert and making it through the day without the need for a nap or the desire to have caffeine, that's a good amount of sleep. Now, people are different biochemically, naturally, and some people can rejuvenate enough during the night with 4 hours of sleep or somewhere in that neighborhood and be okay. But if people are forcing themselves to get up, guzzling down a bunch of coffee and making it through the day, then it's not going to work out very well for them at night. And yes, we did have a culture which for 50 years was all about bragging about how productive you were and how little sleep you got as a test of masculinity or something. And of course, society is now coming around to the idea that it is important. And we have the work of Arianna Huffington and a number of people like that who are now emphasizing this. They're in recovery from, productivity addiction. And so, yeah, the science is there. The general thrust in society is toward uh, getting a refreshing sleep and making good decisions during the day and enjoying your day and being happy, and not so much based on how much you can produce. But there's pretty good evidence that you actually can produce just as much or maybe more, and the quality might be better when you do get enough sleep and you work fewer hours. You're just not frantically multitasking, things like that. Let me mention an herbal medicine that comes from Ayurveda that's very good for sleep. This herb is Shankpushpi. I'll spell it. It's Shanka, Shanka, and the same word, Pushpi. Shunk is a conch uh, that big sea snail, that people relate to, shunk, because the flower itself is twisted in a spiral when it comes out of the bud, and then it opens up during the day. So it's like a conch shell, and pushpi just means flower. So this is a type of morning glory, and it's a great remedy for uh, just balancing brain power, cognition, consciousness. It happens to be a little sedating, and so many people find that it's very good for sleep. But otherwise, it's used to increase cognitive functions given to kids to improve their test scores in school. Very well known remedy. It's a little cooling in energy, which just means that it tends to kind of calm down your metabolism, reduce your heart rate, reduce circulation a little bit, reduce the passage of food through your digestive tract. And you can use it in small doses throughout the day to maintain awareness and good cognition, focus. And then, or you could take a large dose at bedtime. It works pretty quickly, 15 minutes, and that will knock you out so that you have a good sleep during the night. Typical dose of shanpushpi would be about 10 grams, and you could take that as tea or in capsules, or you could just use the powder itself and stir that into something mushy like mashed vegetables or yogurt or something, and swallow that when you need it. So modest doses throughout the day for anxiety, and then improving cognition, or one large dose in the evening for sleep.
Well, I'll definitely look into that, and I think that our audience will be really happy to hear about that because I think that it's a difficult struggle that young people face is figuring out a good sleep schedule. And I'm turning 28 soon, and it's, everyone says it becomes, as you age, it becomes more difficult to operate on just like less and less sleep and the rate of recovery from a lack of sleep. I wanted to speak a bit about brain health. I'm aware of, commonly now a lot of people are emphasizing um, mushrooms like lion's mane and other mushrooms for that kind of brain health. I know fish oil and ginkgo. I wanted you to speak to, I guess, some of the other herbs and remedies for brain health, because Alzheimer's is something that is prevalent. A lot of people in the United States who have played football or other things, struggle from, are going to struggle from a future of brain, issues that can be problematic. So if you could speak to that, thank you, the audience.
Yeah, well, Alzheimer's is a real tricky situation. We haven't figured out a way to cure it yet. We can now slow it down a bit, but tremendous strides are being made both in conventional neurology and also alternative medicine, and those are coming closer and closer together. So I have a colleague who is a holistic medical doctor that works only with Alzheimer's, and he's convinced that we will have cracked the code within about the next 10 years. So we're getting better and better at treating it. So far, we can't claim that we cure it, but it's definitely quite challenging. So that's its own problem. These other things like brain damage from concussions, from impacts with sports, things like that, another type of thing. So I'll give you some generally beneficial remedies for the brain that might have benefit in any of these situations. But to treat something like Alzheimer's or um, concussive brain injury, we're going to need to be much more specifically targeted. So the first herb to be aware of here is the herb gotukola. It's Gotukola, probably the best nerve and brain herb in the world. Very, very famous. It grows from India all the way over through South Asia, Southeast Asia, and all the way down to the Philippines and even toward Australia. It's a widely distributed herb. It's a flimsy little plant that grows in wet environments like irrigation ditches and swamps and things like that. So it's harvested from those places. It has a nutritional uh, perspective, very much like, let's say, something like spinach. And so it's very food like. In India, it's mainly used as a medicine, but if you go a little further east, Vietnam, Thailand, that area, people often eat it as a food. So if this is available to you fresh, which it probably won't be depending on where you're listening, but in North America, very hard to find fresh. But otherwise, you could reconstitute it and then use it as a food. You could make pesto out of it, all kinds of things like that. Otherwise, you're going to use it as a tea. The relatively mild herb, very broad spectrum remedy for enhancing the actual tissue of the nerves and brain. So it's my go-to remedy for multiple sclerosis, for example. Just very good for supporting the tissue of the nervous system. Otherwise, it enhances cognitive function. And so it's used by yoga practitioners to enhance meditation, that sort of thing. So, being a relatively mild herb, the dose that's really going to work to treat somebody that actually has a nerve situation is about 30 grams brewed as tea. So, when we talk about tea doses, we're talking about the dry weight of the herb. So, you weigh out 30 grams of the chopped dried material, make that into tea. It's going to be way more than you think it should be. We're talking about medicine here, not beverage. So beverage teas typically uh, are about 2 ounces, not 2 ounces, 2 grams of herb. And those are really lifestyle teas or maintenance kinds of teas. But to treat the nervous system with an actual existing situation, 30 grams is tea. And then once that begins to get resolved, one could titrate the dose down, reduce the dose gradually down to a dose of maybe a beverage strength cup a day, something like that. So if a person is looking to prevent brain issues, then just a beverage strength cup a day or a couple capsules, something like that would be fine. You do that for the next 70 years of your life. Another one is a very simple food, and that's celery. Celery has a profound effect on the brain. At the hospital, we use celery extensively, mainly as juice. The problem with celery is just that it's real fibrous. It's hard to chew a lot of it to get enough of it in. But celery can be used very much as a cooked vegetable. In my house, when we have mixed steamed vegetables, we often have celery as part of that mixture, or you can just eat a bowl of steamed celery or celery soup or any way you want to use that. Less common in our culture to use it that way as a cooked vegetable. Most people think of it as a garnish or something in potato salad or something. But otherwise, celery juice would be the way to go. In the hospital, we would try to get people to drink a quart a day of celery juice, but we had big industrial juicers and a whole kitchen staff and everything. So any amount they can get in is going to be good. So it's calming and cooling, very good for the brain all the way around. The next herb on my list is an herb called calamus, Calamus, calamus. So that's the root of a plant that grows throughout Eurasia, and that's a very famous mind herb in Ayurveda, used in Chinese medicine in a similar way. So it enhances cognition, awareness, memory. I teach in a couple medical schools, and so I always talk to the medical students about calamus because they're studying, 60 hours a week and in class 40 hours a week, and they're just completely overwhelmed. And so they're trying to cram for a test at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're saying, I read that last page and I can't remember any of it, and I have to reread it again. So I suggest using calamus, and they say, "Gosh, I can remember that page that I read, at 2 o'clock in the morning." It really enhances cognition quickly, dramatically, very much a learning tool, and also enhances meditation. Now, calamus is a potent herb as opposed to, let's say, gotu kola, which is a milder herb. And in fact, those two are often used together because they have complementary energetics, whereas gotu kola is cooling and mild. Calamus is warming and potent. So you're talking very small doses of calamus. Most people do well with a dose of about 4 grams, which is very easy to take in pill form or powder, something like that. I would start with a dose of 250 milligrams per day and work up in divided doses to the dose that gives you the optimizing benefit in your cognition and doesn't cause nausea. Calamus can be drastically nauseating. Let me say that again. It can be drastically nauseating. So you want to be very careful. Take it in divided doses with food. Many people have just thought, oh, how bad could it be? They chucked down the 4 grams, and in 10 minutes they found out how nauseating it can be. So we're going to be careful with that one. But over the course of maybe 10 days or so, most people can build up to a dose of something like 4 grams. You take it with food, that reduces the nausea, and you begin to notice improvements in memory and like that. It can cause what I would call weird thoughts if you take too much. That's how you know you're taking too much. So you're just sitting there doing whatever you're doing, and then all of a sudden you think, I wonder what would happen if a blue elephant walked through that door. And you say, wait a minute, that's okay, too much calamus. So it doesn't make you hallucinate or anything, but it just expands the boundaries of your thinking, which can be good if you're studying for a test, but not so good if you're thinking about blue elephants. So somewhere in there is the optimal dose, the dose that gives you cognitive improvement without nausea. Anyway, so those are some examples.
Calamus, that sounds, really interesting just based off of students having to, cram in, whether it's medical school or studying for the bar, or, there's just so many different things that just take a lot of concentration and effort, and memory is something that is, I feel that a lot of people are trying to hack. Another thing is most recently that I think most people can relate to, and something that I hear from just generally people of all ages who just express burnout and talk about energy. And personally, my struggles with specific medications like Adderall, or these type of amphetamines for energy, or excessive use of caffeine seems to be something that is very typical, for younger people, and prescribed at a very young age for energy. And then, they have a only reference point of utilizing these, you know, medications that can, really be damaging, potentially, depending, I'm not a doctor, but depending on the person. So for energy, what specifically would you advise, and people who are dealing with burnout, or that are overuse caffeine or medication?
Yeah, well, I have been in practice for 52 years, and I still get up every morning feeling great about what I'm going to do. I still enjoy it. I work very long days. I often put in 12-hour days. That would kind of be the norm, and I've been doing that forever. So I would say the thing that really makes the difference, of course, we have all these other ancillary things like getting solid sleep and eating a good diet and like that, but meditation is the difference. And I guess my answer to all these questions really would be meditation. That's the thing that is at the core of all these ideas. That's what helps people with their cravings, with their outlook on life, helps them maintain a balanced outlook on life and good energy. So I would recommend that to anybody and everybody as the first thing to investigate with all these ideas. But I understand that when people have physical kinds of concerns, you have a tummy ache or a backache, or you hurt, or you can't stay awake, or any of those things. It's important to get those things handled. So from the Ayurvedic perspective, Ayurveda usually recommends working on the body first because it's the most stable. Once you get some nice changes there, you can sustain them well, and then go on to the mental things, which would include the medication. But in terms of remedies for energy, let me mention one from Ayurveda called Kapikachu. It's Kapi, and the next word is Kacchu, Kapikachu, which means itching like a monkey. The reason that it has that funny name is because it's a bean, it's a legume that grows in the tropics of Asia, that has a bunch of fuzzy fur on the outside of the bean. It's sometimes called velvet bean because it looks kind of fuzzy like velvet. Those are a bunch of tiny, irritating hairs that if you touch that bean, they'll go into your skin and itch like crazy. But we're not going to have anything to do with the husk of the bean. We're going to be using the seeds. So kapikachu seed is very easily available. You can get it from any herb supplier on the internet, and it's a source of dopa, which is an amino acid that your body then converts to dopamine. So people find that they have increased libido, increased sexual functioning, better able to concentrate. Their experience of the awards, the reward system of their body, of the things that they do, doesn't have to be all jacked up and over exaggerated like using drugs, but they get a very nice dopamine kind of response from a normal good meal, or watching a good movie, or whatever it is that they're doing. So people feel better, happier, they have more energy all the way around. So kapikachu, the typical dose there is about 7 grams The beans are dried. They look a little bit like kidney beans. They come in two colors, black and white, and I don't know if there's any difference between those two. Usually they're just ground to powder and mixed up, and so you get kind of a white, off-white material with some black specks in it. That's what it's going to look like, and you can just use that as powder if you choose. It's tasteless basically, or you can take it in pills. So you want to start with about a gram and then work up gradually. You could increase the dose by a gram a day, let's say, and you get up around 5, 6, 7 grams, and you start to feel those things I'm mentioning, and you can sustain whatever dose allows you to feel best there. So sort of in the 2 to 10 gram range. The middle of the bell curve is going to be around 6, 7 grams. Kapikachu.
Well, thank you so much. That's great and really helpful. I just wanted to, I guess, conclude with just your top three supplements that you feel that everyone should be taking.
Yeah. So the first one, some of these are not going to be Ayurvedic whatsoever. So the first one is magnesium. Magnesium is the number one nutrient deficiency in our culture for all kinds of reasons, both the way food is grown and the way that we have chosen the food to eat. So magnesium is what makes green vegetables green, and what don't people eat anymore? Green vegetables. So 95% of people have magnesium deficiency, and it's involved in 800 different chemical reactions in your body. Some people are now calling it the master nutrient. So when I was in school, it was a kind of a ignored micronutrient that, why do you care? Yeah, it helps, works with calcium to help build strong bones, but everybody has enough anyway, so don't worry about it. In the last, let's say, 10 years, thousands of studies on magnesium and the benefits. So that would be one. I would recommend the form magnesium glycinate. That's the form that typically has the fewest digestive side effects. The next one would be vitamin D. That one's tied for deficiency with magnesium at, again, 95% of modern people being deficient. Vitamin D is made in your skin in the sunlight, and the reason that we're all deficient is because we all have indoor jobs and we put on sunscreen when we go outside. But fortunately, vitamin D is available as a supplement. You want to take a dose that will give you a blood level of about 75 nanograms per milliliter. 75, that's the optimal sweet spot clinically. And when you test people, very often where I live, it's a cloudy, cold place. Nobody goes out into the sun, if there even is any sun. And I get levels of 2 or 5 or 7 when people are tested. We want 75. So drastic deficiency. Vitamin D is the only substance in the body that has a receptor on every single cell of our 30 trillion cells. So it's a hormone that that reduces inflammation, and it has so many other different functions of the body, including enhancing immune function, um, bone health, as we mentioned, and it just does so many things for so many people. I would say that the this vitamin D and magnesium combination is one of the 5 most important things I've ever learned in my entire practice. That the realization that everybody was deficient in those two things was just a real revolution, and it did revolutionize my practice. The third thing would be some sort of a nutritive tonic, a building, balancing herbal remedy that you take every day, um, that helps to uh, keep your body in that zone of dynamic balance. Ginseng is a great example that many people have heard of, and that would be a good thing to use. But there are probably 20 or 30 nutritive tonics that are easily available for us out there in the marketplace. Another one would be ashwagandha. That one comes from Ayurveda. It's very popular now. Everybody will have heard of it. So these nutritive tonics, you just take a gram or two a day forever. Ginseng usually isn't started until about age 30 or 35, but most of the others can be started at puberty. So I presume all of our audience is past puberty already, and so they could start right now, just taking a gram or two. That doesn't make much difference in the way you feel the first, matter of few weeks, but over a few months, you begin to realize you just have much more stable energy, good solid sleep, balanced emotions. You're functioning cognitively better, your memory, your thought processes. And then it has profound anti-aging benefits in terms of supporting immune function. So those are things like almost all of them are anti-cancer, for example, and all the debilities of aging that people typically gradually develop for the last 10 years of their life, which just makes them miserable. It tends to offset those things. So the sooner the better with a nutritive tonic. All right, so that gives you your top three.
Amazing. Thanks so much. If you could, before we sign off, if you could just let everyone know where they could find your courses and your work, your website, and yeah, just where we could find you and more of this.
Sure, my website is International Integrative, integrative with a VE on the end, International Integrative, all one word.com. But you could just use my name, KP Khalsa, to Google and you'll get right to my website. So we have a lot of free material there. There's extensive articles and various other webinars and things like that. And we are offering a free gift to Christians audience, and he'll tell you more about that later and make that available to you. I think we haven't quite figured out what that's going to be yet, but something about consciousness and brain power. So we have over 300 recorded courses there. Most of them are 90 minutes, but we teach things that go all the way up to professional certification courses that last anywhere from 1 year to 3 years. Those longer courses are all live online, uh, and then they're recorded so you can go back to them later. So anyway, you can just go there and use the search function to search through the kinds of things you're interested in, and you'll find something on just about every natural healing topic.
Thank you so much, KP. We all appreciate the gift, and we will all be checking out more of your work and these courses. I wanted to just thank you for your energy and presence, and hopefully we can connect in the future and possibly do a follow up.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
the
so
chance to
much.
talk. Yeah, thanks for the chance to talk to all you folks.